Thank you for watching the Finance and Affirmations podcast. I appreciate you being here. Make sure you click the subscribe button so you'll be alerted when I post new content. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about kids, Christmas, and money. I have discussed some of this on a past episode. Go back and look for the episode called Kids and Money from 12/17 of 22. So let's talk about some of the things I've done in the past as it relates to teaching my kids about money. This is just a recap. I started teaching my kids about money using the 3 mason jar system. And so what happens is you get 3 mason jars. One jar is labeled give, one jar is labeled save, and one jar is labeled spend. And I started this when the kids were like 6 and 8 years old, and they both got $4 each. So my husband would go to the bank every month and get dimes so that we could give it to the kids and they could put it in each of the mason jars, okay? And so with their give jar, many times they were using the money that they were going to give to the church for that give jar. And so 10% of their $4 would be 40 cents, right? So my husband would get the dimes and then they would split out what they put in each jar. So they would put the 40 cents in their give jar and they would use the other monies to put some in their savings. I suggested they put about 20% in their save jar, and then the rest would go in their spend jar. I gave them a biweekly allowance because that's how I got paid. And they mainly at that time was spending their money on toys and treats and stickers and stuff like that. So that was their first introduction into handling their own money. We then graduated to using a Greenlight card for their allowance. Now, a Greenlight card is a debit card that's monitored by parents. There's a monthly fee. When I started with Greenlight, the fee was about like $5. I'm not sure if it's higher now. And I knew I had that amount of money in my budget. So I went ahead and got the Greenlight cards. So what happens is there's a parent account. Then you add kids to your parent account. And then what happens is the parent account is linked to a financial institution like a bank or a debit card. And then I load money on that card. And then I, in turn, give that money to my kids for allowance. And so on the Greenlight card, the parents can set guidelines. They can ask their kids or tell their kids rather that they need to do their chores before they get access to those funds. As a parent, you can also determine what places they can buy gifts. So if of course, you don't want like any adult sites or anything like that. So you have those parameters that you can put around it. And you're also alerted whenever your child spends money. So this is like the digital Mason card method, right? Okay. The kids have to set a pin on the card, just like they would on an adult card. And so the reason I like this is because it gave my children practice and experience with using a debit card. You can also send a link to family members who may be out of town or really family members in town. You send them a link to your kid's card and they can load money directly on those cards. You don't have to worry about getting gift cards or anything like that. It could just be loaded right on their Greenlight card. So when times come up and they're like, oh, mom, can I have this? Oh, mom, can I have that? I'm like, sure. Are you going to use your Greenlight card? And then, of course, they're like, oh, well, no. Yeah, it's amazing how much they don't need when they have to pay for it, right? And for those of you who do not know, in addition to teaching financial literacy to adults, I teach it to children. And I have an investment club class that I do with the kids at my church and in my community. And so for that class, we use the Goalsetter card. It works just like the Greenlight card does. However, it's more focused on financial literacy. So the kids have to go through different financial quizzes to be able to unlock the money so that they can spend it. And so while they're in my investment club class, I teach them about saving, budgeting, all of that. And we also teach them how to invest. And so as they're in the class and they're paying attention, they can earn points. And those points are transferred into dollars. And then I put those dollars on their Goalsetter cards. Now, the cards belong to them. They can use the money however they want. Of course, I suggest that they save, and we have savings challenges and things of that nature. So let me tell you about one of the ways that I've used that Goalsetter card for the kids in my investment club class. So in April of 2023, we went to Denver and we visited the US Mint and we visited the University of Denver. And so I knew that each kid was going to have a food allowance of about $150. So I said, rather than me paying for all the food wherever we go, I'm going to load the $150 on each of their cards, and then it'll be their responsibility to pay for food and souvenirs with the money loaded on their Goalsetter card. And so I created this as a budget game. And so the object of the budget game was to have the most amount of money at the end. Overall, it was a great lesson for the kids. They learned a lot. And I also learned a couple of things. One of the things that I didn't realize is that the kids didn't know how to tip using a card. So many of them have maybe been with their parents and their parents will tip cash, but because they weren't the ones dealing with the debit cards, they had no idea how to tip. So for instance, I gave them some options. You can leave a 15%, 18%, what have you. And so on the line, they wrote 15%. Or 18%. They didn't realize that they had to actually do the calculation and then put that on the line and then add everything up for their bill. So I didn't realize they didn't know how to do that. And that was a great lesson for them. So now they know how to do it. In addition, we made them check their receipts to make sure that they were charged correctly, because a part of being a good manager of your money is making sure that you're spending what you plan to spend. Okay. And so they had that for the 3 days that we were in Denver. And again, how interesting it is when you have to pay for your own food and when you have to pay for your own souvenirs, for the kids to realize, maybe I don't really need that. Like I said, at the end of the game, the child with the most money won the game. Now, of course, these kids are brilliant, right? They're like, well, what if we just don't eat? They were required to purchase breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So nobody went hungry. All right. And so then whoever had the most money at the end won. And so I had a first place, a second place, and third place winners. And so basically I gave them a little more money for them being the best budgeters in the game. And the kids said that they learned a lot too. And it was funny because the kid who came in second place was like, darn, if I hadn't bought that drink at Chipotle, I would have won, because the balances were so close together. So they said that they really learned a lot. I also learned a lot. Maybe when you go on a trip, you could do something like this with your kids to teach them how to manage their money. So now I want to talk to you what I've done in the past for my kids as it relates to Christmas, right? And getting them Christmas gifts. So, I have a holiday savings account that I use each year. Money automatically comes from my check and it goes into that account. And the account is actually for Christmas and for birthdays. So I have in my mind the amount of money I want to give the kids for Christmas and the amount I want to give them for their birthdays. Okay. And so from that account, that's how I was taking care of Christmas in the past. Now, when they were smaller, I went through the whole thing of getting a list and all of that kind of stuff. And what really changed the way I did Christmas gifts was one year we were going out of town. And so the kids were still pretty small and they were up in arms because they were like, well, how is Santa going to know where we are? And I was more concerned about if we get down there and we take all these gifts, that's baggage fees. And then when we come back, if family members and things down there want to give them gifts, that's more weight, more baggage fees. And I hate fees. Okay. So what me and my husband did is we bought them gifts, but we left them here at the house and we took 2 gifts each with us to Atlanta. And then we asked family members, if you're going to get them a gift, please just give us the gift card to that store and that we will go ahead and get those gifts when we get back. And so that's what we did. And it worked out good. And when we got back, they still had gifts under the tree. So that worked out pretty good for us that year. After that, well, wait, spoiler alert. If you have kids with you in the room, you may want them to leave the room for just a second. I'll give you a second. All right, so I decided I was no longer going to perpetuate the myth of Santa. I explained to my kids that Santa was mommy and daddy. So once I told them, listen, daddy and I are Santa Claus, it was so funny because they said to me, well, mom, I already knew that, but we didn't want to tell you that we didn't believe in Santa because then we thought you weren't going to buy us any gifts. So there was like a myth going on both ways, right? I also decided that I was not going to do any Christmas lists anymore. So what I decided to do that next year was just give them the money that I was going to use to buy their gifts. So we talked about it ahead of time. So the kids knew that when they got up, there wasn't going to be a gang of gifts under the tree, but they knew they were going to get the money they wanted and then use that money to go buy the gifts that they wanted. And that's what we did. So we went to the store, we bought the gifts, they had a great time. Now, my son at the time, it was just there was a car or something he wanted, and it was just so hard for him to make a decision. So we had to work through that. But overall, it worked out well for us. Them buying their gifts was a great thing. Them buying their own gifts showed them how they had to budget their money because I think also my son wanted something that was going to go over his budget, and he had to decide, okay, well, I can't get that, so I have to get this. So he was having to make a decision on whether he was going to buy a particular toy or not because he was going to go over budget. So they were already learning through that how to budget their money. So now we've graduated to putting their Christmas and birthday money on their Greenlight cards, okay? But we did have to tweak Christmas just a little bit because my daughter said she missed being able to get up, go under the tree, and open gifts. So what we did about that was we now do a family gift exchange so that there will be gifts under the tree. And what I also do, I don't know if anybody else does this, but I think Christmas time is the best time to replenish like underwear and socks and pajamas and stuff like that. So I also wrap those as well, and so that we all have something to unwrap on Christmas morning. So another thing that you could do in lieu of buying gifts for your kids is create experiences for them around the holidays. So maybe you and your family take a special trip for Christmas. I remember one year, this was Thanksgiving, where we weren't going to be able to go back with our family that year for Thanksgiving. And so we decided to go to a hotel. My kids were pretty small. We went to a hotel that had a small water park. Okay. And so the kids had a ball. There was hardly anybody in there. So they pretty much had the run of the place for themselves. And we had a great time. And my kids still remember that time when we went to that hotel and that water park for Thanksgiving. So think of some experiences that you can share with your kids over the holidays. And now some people may say, well, my kids are going to still expect gifts, or my kids are going to expect this or that. You know what I found with my kids is that when I sit them down and I explain to them what the plan is, and I explain to them why we're doing what we're doing, they really do get on board. There's not a whole lot of pushback. And I've been pretty successful that way. I try to prepare them as much as possible and explain to them what's going on so that they have an understanding, and they normally are pretty good with it. Okay, so the next thing I want to cover is on that last solo episode, I told you that there was a financial decision that I needed to make for this season. So just a quick recap on that. So the dilemma is I really wanted to go to Atlanta for Christmas this year. We haven't been there for Christmas in a long time, but it's kind of like last minute, right? So I didn't plan for it. I didn't budget for it, anything like that. And when I go to Atlanta, we're talking about, getting multiple tickets. We typically rent a car, and then that doesn't include the money that we spend while we're there, socializing, eating, getting gifts for our other family members, that kind of thing. So the cost of us going to Atlanta is a pretty significant cost. Okay. So that's the first thing, right? It's like, oh, I really want to go to Atlanta. But then one of the things that I didn't remember was that I needed to add more money to my holiday account because my daughter's Sweet 16 is coming up, right? And so I didn't think like, oh, I need to put more money in there because the budget that I have for her regular birthdays for this 16th birthday, it's not going to be enough for the budget that we want to do for her 16th birthday. So it's like, okay. So I had to make a decision. What am I going to do? I didn't have the money for the Christmas saved. I don't have the extra money for the budget for the Sweet 16. So I had to decide what I was going to do. Now, there's a few options. I could go to Atlanta for Christmas and cut as many costs as possible, right? That's one thing. I could cut costs on my daughter's Sweet 16 party, right? And be able to do both. So we could cut costs on both and be able to go there for Christmas and have a nice Sweet 16. Or I could forego going to Atlanta, right? And so what I actually decided to do was to forego going to Atlanta. So I could save that money going to Atlanta. I can keep my daughter's Sweet 16 budget because you only turn 16 once. And that's something that I want her to be able to celebrate. But what I also decided to do was have some local experiences with my family here. Okay, so we wouldn't have to spend multiple thousands of dollars, but we could have an experience and have the memories, right? So right now we're having fun thinking up what we're going to do for Christmas so I can make sure both of them have a fun experience that they want to do. And I can also save money in the process, right? And we will have those memories, right? Those memories are priceless. We can share those for a lifetime. Now, some people might be saying, wait a minute, you didn't budget for this. Why are you spending money on stuff that you didn't budget for? Well, let me just say one thing. I am like so into budgeting. I am so into saving. I told you, for me, saving feels good, right? But I know that a budget that's too restrictive is a budget that you're not going to stick to, right? So you need to have a budget that is in alignment with what brings you joy. And being able to have a nice Sweet 16 party for my daughter will bring me joy. Having these experiences with my family locally will bring me joy. And I can do both of those things without a significant hit to my budget. Now, if you're like me, I'm going to be looking for ways to earn extra money to offset the cost, but I'm going to make sure that I have those experiences with my family. I would love to hear how you're using your resources for Christmas and how you have taught your children how to manage their money. So that's all for this episode. Until next time, blessings. I hope you enjoyed watching the Finance and Affirmations podcast. If you haven't already done so, click the subscribe button. Until next time, blessings.